So welcome everyone. I am Marsha Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Zedek Social Justice Fund. Thank you for joining us again. For those of you who are coming back from our previous webinars, for those of you who are new to us, welcome to the fourth webinar in our webinar series, Bold People, Magic Dreams. And we've been, over the course of 4 webinars, sharing the results of community research project that we engaged in 2019. And what we did with that research is used it to shift our programming to be more radically in line with our values and to be engaging in social justice philanthropy and centering the voices of those who are most impacted by the oppressions that we hope to end. And so we realized we didn't want to keep all of that wonderful information to ourselves. What we really wanted to do was make sure that we are sharing this information with both other funders and our community. So this webinar is actually going to be a little different than the ones that we've held in the past. The others were really focused on us transmitting information to you about what our experience was and sharing our learnings and how we implemented. But we want this session to be more conversational, an opportunity for you to touch base with other people who have been either involved in social justice work or have a heart for it, and to be able to kind of process this information together. So just so you know what the structure will be, we'll split you into breakout groups so that you can introduce yourselves and let each other know who's actually in the space. Then we'll come back and I'll share some information that we've been learning at Zedek about the gifts and the challenges of doing social justice work in Asheville. But part of the reason we wanted this to be conversational is we know we have a bunch of people on the call who know firsthand the gifts and challenges of doing social justice work in Asheville or elsewhere. And we felt it was really important to bring your voices in on the call. So after that portion of us sharing our the information that we've learned from the report, we're going to put you back in those breakout rooms, the same ones, so you get an opportunity to share your learnings with each other and hopefully build some collaborations or coalitions, connections with other folks that you have not had the opportunity to do so yet. So just as an awareness, we have both people from Asheville and folks outside of Asheville in this space. And what we're asking you to do is just to share from the authenticity of your experience, right? Either whether you're sharing about your experience as an organizer or sharing about your experience in a funder trying to access or support organizers, wherever you are is okay. But just know that the rooms are intentionally mixed so that we're getting the opportunity to perhaps hear from some voices in different positions in this work. I want you to keep a few community agreements in mind before we split y'all up. Just 3 community agreements. 1, use I statements whenever possible. It's going to be so tempting to generalize your experience and to say, here's everything I know about working in Asheville. But we want you to make sure that you're sharing from your perspective and allowing people to have their own. Stay engaged and stay curious, right? So if someone says something that doesn't feel like it jives with your experience, that's totally fine. But go ahead and ask. So I'm curious. Tell me more about this. And use that as an opportunity maybe to learn more about where someone else is coming from. And the third community agreement, accept non-closure. There's probably going to be a lot of juicy conversation emerging today that we may not be able to put a cute little bow on. But the process of conversating or having conversations is just enough and valuable enough in and of itself, right? So I want you to think about these 3 community agreements. You're going to use I statements, stay engaged and curious. And number 3, accept non-closure if at all possible. All right. So here's what we'll have you do in those breakout groups. I'm going to put in the chat what our questions are for you. And they're the typical ones you've seen at a lot of meetings. Your name, your pronouns, your organization or the work that you do in community, and why you chose to attend this session. Let's see who's in this space with us. All right, I'm about to open our breakout rooms. You'll see an invite for a breakout room. in a minute. And some of you are actually staying in the main room because that's the room where we can have interpretation. All right. So we are all back together as a full group. I'm going to share a little bit of what I was saying to my group, which is this moment that we're having today. We've actually spent the last 3 webinars learning a lot about what is happening for Zedek internally and how we've changed based on this community data. But today is all about us using our privilege to amplify other voices. This is our moment of kind of code switching, if you will, right? We spend a lot of time, Zedek, trying allying ourselves with movement workers, and really making sure that our practices are in alignment with folks who are doing grassroots work. And this is our moment to, code switch and realize that because of how white supremacy is structured, an organization that's called Zedek Social Justice Fund that holds a lot of money is also going to be able to get some voices in the room together that might not have already come together. And so we're using our platform to share and amplify the voices of folks in our community and what they've been saying that they need from funders, but not just from funders, what they need from other members in their community to make sure that social justice work keeps moving forward. Um, and because of that, because we're amplifying voices that already exist in community that you may have already heard, a lot of what you'll hear won't be unique, right? But we're using this moment to really make sure that these voices and these opinions and perspectives are given, the legitimacy that comes with being amplified by a fund. But I think it's important to name that these voices are around you all the time, and that this information is around you all the time. And so that there are so many ways in which you can reach out yourself into community to get to hear what folks have to say. So I'm going to share a little bit about what we found in our community research report and what got highlighted, and then we'll have moments to come back into groups and allow you to speak to what you're seeing. So here are the major themes, right? I think it's important to kind of give some context in the ways that the folks that we were interviewing gave us some context. They named that right now is a time of great unveiling, that Asheville is a place that has long been heralded as this wildly progressive Southern city, but it's also undergoing gentrification at a faster pace than almost any other place in the country. When you look at the census data, Asheville is 82% white, 11% Black, 7% Latinx. And of course, there are other cultures and ethnicities and races that are not even included in this data. And the data from our census is also not including much about what's going on with our LGBTQ plus or Jewish parts of our community. But it's important to note that we're predominantly white, and actually that the numbers of BIPOC folks in our town has actually decreased from one census to the next. So we are experiencing racial disparities in everything from public education to policing. We've got some of the highest rates of racial disparities in North Carolina. Asheville, for most people, for many people, I'll say that, is the happiest town in America. But it's also a place of blissful ignorance. The dominant story of Asheville, North Carolina is one-sided. It ignores the gorgeous history of movement building here and the legacies of harm that are a part of Asheville's history. So the listening that we're asking you to do right now is the first step towards healing. We want to spotlight the voices of folks living and laboring for justice here, voices that are often ignored by people with power and resources. As you listen, I want you to do 2 things. One, try and imagine, or as you're listening, think about what you're hearing and how it's the mirror to an experience that you've already had. And also think about how are some of what you're hearing windows to a new experience, right? So as you're listening, you're thinking about your mirrors and your windows. What do I see that reflects me? And what do I see that's new? So let's dive in. One of the quotes that emerged in our research that I think says a lot about where we are, particularly about the gifts, is that Asheville is, in particular, has some incredibly gifted and loving people who are very creative. I'm amazed at the art that comes out of this trauma. I think that's really unique about Asheville. People are really creative and they tend to work across lines. You see Black and Latinx and LGBTQ plus people working together, trans people across the line, cross the line and feel comfortable enough to do that in Asheville. Keeping in mind this is one person's perspective, but they're speaking a little bit to these gifts. But what we also noticed in the research is, and this is what I loved about scoping through it, is that folks will tell you the gifts and they'll tell you the challenges as well. One that emerged, I think people here are living with the impact of urban renewal, redlining, and gentrification, and it's hurtful, it's painful. And I feel like the city of Asheville and even the county, it's one thing to have a proclamation for racial healing, but it's another thing to actually get on the ground and roll up your sleeves and say, we're going to stop some of the stuff we've been doing. And we're going to work to get people back in their communities that their families settled in 100 years ago. What I hear, what we've heard activists saying more than ever is the importance to go from theory to action, from words and statements to action. So again, let's reflect on some of these gifts: collaborative spirit, creativity, legacy, and culture. The thing about being in Appalachia is that there are deep cultures of resistance here, deep pieces of information here. And folks who are doing the movement work are really understand that they're part of a longer role, and the Southern emphasis on connection and community building is critical to doing movement work. Folks have also named that the organizing base and infrastructure is strong here. You just see a really strong, connected community organizing base that is, it can't just be rolled over, said one of our participants. Someone else said there's artists, there's strategy folks, there's on the floor, on the ground, direct support. And folks also named that there are these deep relationships here, that when you actually spend the time to sit in community and show up consistently, you can build the kind of deep relationships that lead to loving relationships, lead to care, community care, lead to mutual aid when you need it, and also lead to the folks that you can call to jump into the protest when you need it. And there's some financial wealth. One of our participants said, there's a lot of money in Asheville. And I really see money moving towards movement work and being utilized in this really profound way that I haven't seen in other parts of the US. So there is a deep found of wealth in this city, in particular because we're known as a retirement town for folks who are middle class or upper middle class. But it's important to note that even with these benefits and these gifts of organizing, that they're also revealing only one aspect, or what the interviewee's aspect is or perspective is, of what it means to be doing work in this town. The other things that emerged, that there's an enduring legacy of injustice. One of the quotes that came about, I think, says it better than I could even say it myself. The level of ridiculousness of how this community treats marginalized people, just the extremity of it. Pause. Right? That this person was kind of so flummoxed with the idea of how just unjust our town is, that they're just naming, like using the word ridiculousness to talk about the legacy of injustice here. And that is really, can sometimes be really confusing with what we know and what we say is true about Asheville. Our community organizers aren't feeling it. They're not feeling that this is completely the loving town that folks say that it is. They're also feeling really challenged about the economic development that occurs in this town that is centered on tourism. One of the quotes that emerged, our city and our region has built an image around tourism that is not grounded in the reality of our community. And therefore, they're attracting people who evolved into a dream that they continue to perpetuate and build in Asheville. And that dream excludes whole communities. Asheville is creating a story of who they are. And the story that's publicly seen is the tourism story. And yet, what does that mean for those of us who are actually trying to build long-term lives here, right? And who are here for generations? There's a high cost of living and low compared or partnered with low-wage jobs that is keeping people behind. Right now, we're in a crisis where we have to feed our families and it's work, work, work. But we shouldn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs to make our ends meet. I think this is one of the places where Asheville kind of matches a little bit what's happening across the country. High cost of living compared with partnered with low wage jobs. And that continues to be exacerbated the more and more we invest in tourism. It's harder, the cost of buying a home gets higher, while we're investing in the jobs that typically come with tourism and the restaurant industry are not jobs that are salaried. They don't typically come with benefits. They typically do not pay a living wage. One of the things, other items that folks named as the challenge to organizing in Asheville, and this one came up pretty strongly, is Asheville's progressive image is one of the biggest challenges. One of the quotes was, "The belief in us being a liberal, progressive town is a barrier to justice because the majority is quite convinced that a small action or even a statement will yield impact and change, whereas all it actually is words. But because we have such a liberal, progressive identity, those words are enough for us to think that somehow something good has just happened." Right? And folks are really calling us to the mat about what we say Asheville is and the difference between that and what the experience is of what Asheville is. Right? And one of the other themes that emerged, which I found fascinating, because in the gifts of Asheville, people were naming, wow, there are financial resources here. But what they also named is there's a lack of infrastructure for resources to flow. That we know that there's wealth in this town and we're not releasing it enough to be able to support the grassroots movement work that needs to happen to shift the needle on all of these items that we say that we care about. We're going to spend some time today kind of speaking to what people think is needed to solve these things, but I wanted to take moments to highlight what folks said from the community research report in terms of what they need in this moment. And they needed four major things. One, convenings to reflect, connect, and heal. The quote, "I think what's important is continuing to create space for cross-movement conversation and solidarity to happen." It's part of the reason we're having these webinar series, and this one in particular, hopefully moments to just connect. And most of our respondents also said that it's important for us to invest in communities of color, especially with the high rate of gentrification that's occurring. And folks really named this, whether I believe named this, whether or not they were people of color themselves. They said, if we can't get land, other people are going to buy it and they're going to put more houses and they're going to put more breweries and connect to the Greenway because it's just 2 minutes from downtown. And it's been happening so fast. And that's what feels impossible sometimes, catching up to the fast pace of gentrification. A lot of folks also named that we need a plan for reparations. It's important for us to heal the racial rifts that have occurred in this town, but not just the racial rifts, but the material conditions of the folks in this town. Someone said, "I continue to read The State of Black Asheville, and it is just heartbreaking because there's been so much research done in Asheville regarding the Black community. And the only answers that folks seem to have is just, let's put money into this nonprofit and hope it goes well. And let's just have a bias training and hope it goes well." And I think those things are good, but I just question, how are we changing the material conditions of people? You can have all the bias trainings and fund all the most amazing organizations, but we still have people who can't pay their light bill. We still have people suffering. For me, I just wonder, what does this work mean if the majority of the community is still suffering? I think that, for me at least, is a powerful question that sits with me as we think about how we do our work at Zedek. What does it mean to be doing all this funding work if folks are still suffering? The last thing folks have named that they needed in this moment is restorative justice and community accountability processes. And they're specifically naming restorative justice practices to keep folks from being having to be engaged with the carceral system, keeping folks away from the justice system or slipping into our system of mass incarceration, but also needing the restorative justice practices to help heal any community rifts that emerge in the process of organizing. How do we help people who are doing grassroots movement work, who are doing nonprofit work, or if that's how their social justice work is showing up? How do we help them connect with each other when harm has been done in a way that allows both parties to walk away knowing that they have a deeper connection and they can continue to engage in this social justice work together? So what we'll do now that you've had the chance to see some of these things that our community is asking for is return you back to your groups. And as we review, or as you think through our prompt for the conversation that you're about to have, is just to share what your reflections have been. In what ways are what you've seen here a mirror of your own experience? And in what way are they a window to a new experience? And if you can't remember any of those questions, just share what resonates with you, right? So I will put us back in our breakout rooms. Welcome back, folks. I think I'm hearing some sighs on the call. I don't know if I'm just looking at your faces and I hear some sighs. I'm imagining some juicy conversation was happening. So this is our moment to kind of share together as a larger group and hear what the other groups were talking about. Um, are there a few? Here's the guiding question: what kind of important concepts emerged from the discussion you had? And anyone can feel free to unmute themselves and just say, like, what felt like an important theme from your discussion that we need to make sure the whole group hears.
Well, in the interest of time, I do want to mention that within our group, one of the things that came out was folks having enough time to come together to vision, and to dream, and to do that type of work together, and and the fact that that type of work sometimes comes out of deep learning, and whether or not we have the space and the capacity to come together to do some learning and then move into a visioning process, to support in the different areas that, we want to see work advance. And there is a realization that sometimes we're just at an organizational level too tired to move from here, which is down in the community work, to visioning and pushing up further, and how important it is for us to have that time and that space.
I think what emerged in our group was something similar. That was the last piece that we were really talking about is how hard it is to be involved in the minutia of the work, but also need to be doing like the larger accountability work, or the larger visioning work together. Some folks named accountability, the importance for us as a community to hold ourselves accountable. Um, and also, like a huge theme that came up, and I'd love to hear if there are any voices who wanted to talk about this a little bit more, is trust and how hard it is to build trust within organizing communities, nonprofit communities, the level of trust needed to move the work forward. Someone said, I think, I don't need you to love me, but can you at least, but we need folks to respect me so that we can kind of keep the work moving forward. Any reflections to share? What else emerged as key themes?
I'm just telling you guys, Marsha and I are both teachers, so we could really banter back and forth, but we really want to hear your voices in the room.
I'll just say that I'm not playing. If you don't want to do something, I don't like talking. I totally don't like. If you're just sitting here having in another meeting talking, then I'm gonna need you to go somewhere and sit down. I'm not about that. But if you're about doing something, I'm on board.
I really hate being a white person that just keeps talking and taking up a lot of space, but I also feel like it's necessary for me to do that as a white person. So I appreciate being a part of this. But yeah, I feel like our group was set up with the themes around building trust and how to move that into action. I feel like Marsha set that up for us to think about. That kept coming up, and yeah, I feel like we talked about accountability culture, and that's what's needed. I've seen that in many organizing circles, neighborhood organizing, government organizing, all of it. It's, yeah, we throw folks away. Um, the whole like personal is political, you know, that's real. Like you don't have to love everybody. Was it Ty you said that earlier? But yeah, sometimes we come to the movement or we come to our neighbors looking for that kind of love. And sometimes we hurt each other and abuse each other and act out and we react to oppression and we can't sit with our privilege, and it's messy, being in community, really messy. But you know, there is a level of respect or love that has to be there for each other to keep each other close. And I appreciated Miss Betty bringing up like restorative justice circles. You know, ways to put that in action would be having these real conversations. I feel like just doing this today was more helpful than me going to some other meeting that I would have been in. And this feels restorative to some extent, even though I haven't been in community with anybody on this call until today. So, but yeah, those were the things that I feel like kept sticking with me. And it's not central to Asheville. It's not this like unique special thing. You know, we live in this white supremacist culture and patriarchal culture and heteronormative culture, and we have a lot of these marginalized intersections that we're all hurt or benefiting from this. So yeah, I'm invested in the accountability culture and building that trust. So I'd love to be a part of that action with folks. And I apologize for my dog. She's kind of losing it right now. We'll step away for a second.
So I just asked permission from someone that was in our group if I could share something that they brought up, which I thought was incredibly insightful and interesting. And that is that there is a funder in our area that has a lot of money, and they have the ability to do one of two things. They have the ability to move the work forward or not. And I think it's very important that we be honest about that in our community, and that we have those conversations about what is the funder responsibility in this social justice work that we're doing, in this work around housing and in this work around food insecurity. And how do we, the human beings in this process, move in a way that we are influencing more of those decisions and not being, led by the nose for that dangling carrot. How do we work together? How do we vision together in a way that puts pressure on those people who make those funding decisions to listen? I might be one of those people. I'm sorry. That was kind of weird as it came out of my mouth. I was like, "Ooh, you might be talking about yourself." But anyway, how do we do this in community in a way that we are being very clear about the needs that we hear, and we're giving community voice? And when do we bring all of community into this process, so we aren't trying to make decisions that we think community needs, but much like this research process, we get a better handle on what we know community wants and needs.
I'm so curious. What do you want to say, but you're worried you can't say here? And if you think you can't say it, I mean, do you want us to give you permission to talk about funders? Because I will say I'm very, very happy that Libby mentioned funders' responsibility in this work, because we do have to call ourselves out. We do need to think about how we're actually supporting this work. A lot of y'all are like, yeah, people need to get in and do it. Don't be here if you don't want to do it. The reality is most of the people on this call are already doing it. You're kind of preaching to the choir. So what is it that you want to say in this conversation that you felt like needs to be said but hasn't been shared yet?
I've seen where one person has started a program because they think it's necessary in the community, and then they get the rest of the community to come and join them in it. And I think that's part of what we have to learn to do, is to take a small example of someone who's doing good and then amplify it and support those people who are trying. on an individual level that we as a community can support together.
I would just kind of one of those things that maybe I'm scared to say, but like, I feel like funders always want us to collaborate and work collectively, but nobody pays us to sit in those meetings. So it's like, produce your own results because we want to see your results, and also then collectively sit in all these other meetings, but do that without any money from us to do that. You know, or if there's like a like I don't know. I think that there's a lot of things that like are put on like nonprofits from funders that then like community is like, oh, we can't trust nonprofits because they're doing X, Y, or Z, or they're not doing X, Y, or Z. But like sometimes the reason we're not doing those things is because like we have to actually pay our employees, you know, as well, and nobody's paying us to do that. And I don't know. I think I'll just stop there. Girl, say the thing. Say the thing. I mean, I think we've been trying to make that argument in our last webinars, but that's also something, you know, Zedic's not perfect. We need to kind of lean into helping and support, like actually providing the capacity for folks to kind of to come together and collaborate. Thank you, Vicky, for being brave and saying the thing.
If I can just kind of piggyback off of what Vicky was saying, like a big thing for us is like right now, I don't know how many people on this call know it, but SC4S is a part of the Medicaid pilot reimbursements for doula services for the state of North Carolina or just in our region. Well, the thing is, you want us to prove to you something that we already know that's a valuable service, but in order for this pilot to be successful, we have to show you how invaluable it is, but you're not giving us enough money to actually be a contribution to the workforce that we need to get this money to get the work done. Like one of these is asking $600. It's a $600 reimbursement, but on private pay as a private pay doula, a trained doula starts out making $900 a birth. So there's no way that 600 is going to cover us for a full birth with prenatals and birth and labor and a postpartum. And we're still expected to show you how the doula did an excellent job. There were great outcomes for the mom, and we saved you money, but you didn't pay us enough. So somewhere in there, either SC4S is going to take that shortcut to make sure that that doula gets what she's worth, or that doula is going to take that shortcut because there's not enough of a balance to kind of equal that out. So then when you talk about collaborating, it's like collaboration for us looks different. And it's not that we don't want to collaborate with our community, because we love our community. Like, I just had a mom in here. I was off camera for like 30 minutes because I had a mom in crisis. And that takes precedence over, and it shouldn't, because they kind of go hand in hand. Like, I need to serve you, but at the same time, I need to be here so that I can hear about the funding opportunities and the collaborative opportunities that can build it. So to your point, like, I like the community collaboration, but at the same time, we're still going to suffer with that. It's not enough funding just for what we're trying to do.
I'll say this because I also was on the nonprofit side before I ended up on the funder side. And it's also, you know, I want to highlight Jennifer's point that you put in the chat, and then funders aren't collaborating, right? And so we're not actually having conversations among each other in the way that we're asking y'all to do the same work, right? So it's important. I think one of the things that we wanted to have happen out of this conversation is starting to reconnect people who may have not seen each other in a while, or connecting you with people that you for some reason or not another, you know that their gift is in community, but you may not already be having a deeper conversation with them. And go ahead and feel free to either DM people here, if and see if there's someone who said like an interesting thing that you're like, yes, I want to do this with you. Go forth, and multiply. But I also want to name that I know that tons of you are already doing that and probably would be doing more of it if you had the time or the energy. So I also want to name that. Feel free to connect in this moment if you want, but also feel free to honor yourself and your self-care. We appreciate that you took the time for this conversation. One of the things that Zedek is hoping to do in the future is helping to convene the kind of relationship and support the kind of relationship building that y'all are saying that you want. And we're also very happy to advocate with other funders about the need to lean more into trust-based philanthropy so that you can use the money that you're given in the way that you need to, and not have to have the same burdening, grant reports that are burdening you. In the same way, we're always happy to talk to another funder about why that might be important so that we can take that off your plate. Libby?
And I just want to say another one of my responsibilities with Zedek Social Justice Fund really is community engagement. And so if you heard from someone today and you're just not quite sure how to make that connection with them, you can also connect with me and I can support in making collaborative connections within this group. Or if there are other organizations in community that you want some assistance, as much as I possibly can, I can be a conduit of creating those relationships.
Yes, connection. All right. So let's hit into our closing round. If you'd like, please, let's have people put in the chat what's something that you got out of our time today. And while folks are doing that, Libby, if you want to put your email in, I also know that both Jennifer and I are available for that kind of connection as well. All right, folks, we're putting in the chat what it is, something that you got out of this conversation today. I am super honored that you took time out of your busy day to be here. We know that you're deep in community work, and that it means something. I know that we were in the conversation and many of you are doing your work while you're also here. And we deeply appreciate you for taking that time. And also know that none of your funding from Zedek is contingent on that type of thing. So if you needed some space to take care of yourself, we always recommend that too. All right, our closing round. Name things in the chat that worked for you or something that you picked up from this session, something that you enjoyed or got some value out of. And while you're doing that, we'll play some music to close us out. Thanks everyone for being here.